Hi there, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to yet another cracking installment of the Map Round Show, this time live from the US. This is the first podcast I'm actually doing from the US. So I've got a makeshift studio here at an Airbnb, but as they say in show business, the show must go on. So, so with me on the line is basically, thank you for being my first guest for me.
I'm honored.
You're in the hot seat today, Robbie. But her name is Robbie Kellman. Welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, it's my pleasure, really. So let's do this. Let's get the elevator pitch from you. We are going to be talking about this here book, The Membership Economy. Well, I'll bring it up for you guys in a moment. But The Membership Economy, which you wrote, and we talk about community and subscription. So there's a lot of stuff that I'm super curious about, very passionate about. But Robbie, why don't you kick us off? Give us the elevator pitch for our viewers around the world who potentially haven't heard about all the amazing things that you do.
Yeah, so I've been focused on subscription and membership models for over 20 years. So since before it was cool, starting with Netflix as my very first subscription client, and including companies like Intuit and Microsoft and Wall Street Journal and Consumer Reports. Everything is becoming subscription these days, and I've probably worked with 20 different industries about thinking about how to drive recurring revenue and build what I call a forever transaction with your customer. And I've written 2 books on the topic, both bestsellers: The Membership Economy, which I think we're talking about today, and The Forever Transaction. Membership Economy is all about why having a membership mindset and building subscription relationships with your customers is so powerful. And the Forever Transaction really gets into, how do I actually do that? What are the step-by-step blueprint to actually building the kind of business that customers never want to leave?
Is that so? I'm curious. What is a forever transaction? I haven't heard about that before. So could you articulate, or maybe just package it up for our viewers?
Yeah, a forever transaction is, normally a transaction happens and then it's over. And you have to go and re-win that customer. A forever transaction, you initiate the transaction, and with that initiation is a commitment for an ongoing basis. Ideally, I use the word forever because it implies, as long as that customer has an ongoing need, we as a company will be able to solve that ongoing need for you, help you achieve your ongoing goal or solve your ongoing problem. And it's a really different way of designing your business model. So instead of really focusing on one transaction, it's saying, what can we do on a forever basis that our customer would be willing to pay us forever? So one example, LinkedIn, their forever promise is to help professionals thrive with their networks throughout their careers. And a kind of funny story about the founders of LinkedIn. Before they founded LinkedIn, they had a company that was a dating site called SocialNet. And, dating is not a great forever transaction because for most people, it's a finite activity. You're hoping to find your soulmate and then you're done. And so, if they're effective at helping you find your soulmate, you're done in, 3 months, 6 months. So even when they were doing a fantastic job of achieving what you wanted them to help you achieve, there was nothing left for you after you found your soulmate. And if you wanted to stick around after you found your soulmate, they probably didn't really want you anyway. So when they started their next company, they said, we're going to look for something with a longer runway. So instead of it being, the dating period before you find your forever someone, they're going to focus on your career, which could last, 30, 40, 50, 60 years. So much, much more valuable for a company that's already oriented toward the long term.
Okay, cool. I just want to bring up your book for everybody. So let me do that for everyone in a moment. But maybe, why did you write the book on memberships and the membership economy? Like, what was the spark there? I'm curious because, like, software is eating the world. Like 90% of what I experience in the software space is membership based or SaaS based anyway. So there's a SaaS for literally anything you can think of. So why did you write this particular book? Why did that matter to you so much?
Yeah. So the book came out in 2015, and I had already been working in subscriptions for over 10 years. And I honestly, Matt, felt like I was spending my days, extolling the virtues of subscriptions. Right now, I mean, it's hard to even imagine, having to explain to somebody the value of recurring revenue and loyal customers. But at the time, it really wasn't something that most companies cared about at all. And so I was constantly, step one is, explain to them why subscriptions are valuable. And then step two, show them how I can help them build one. And I got tired of doing it, honestly. And I thought, I need to just explain it. I'm going to explain it once. I'm going to explain it really well. Subscriptions are powerful. At the heart of them is a member mindset. You need to be part of this membership economy. You might think it's not relevant to your industry, but it works for every industry. It works for every type of business structure, from a solopreneur to a huge traditional company. And here are some examples of how they do it and some of the challenges they face and best practices. And so I wrote the membership economy really as, like, honestly, a 1 pound business card. You just say, this is my point of view. This is what I believe. If this resonates with you, let's have a conversation. And if this seems crazy to you, great. Let's not waste each other's time.
Fair enough. That's the way to do it. I think one of the things I found, I had a lead generation business in South Africa. It was Africa's best tech startup, and in the technology space, it was always, sell, deliver, fixed project fees, etc. And one of the key challenges for us was, how do you actually do subscription in a technology ecosystem where the budgets are always done quarterly? So we never were successful at that from a services perspective. In other words, we'll deliver X service, for Microsoft for an annual basis for them, because they don't buy subscriptions. They're like, cool, we've got $10,000. We want you to do this. We want a 10
We only
return.
sell subscriptions.
We sell sub, dude. Yeah, like we wrote the book on it. You know what I mean? Like with cloud and Azure and whatever. So we never quite got it right. And I wonder whether a key thing for us to unpack before we get into the meat and the potatoes of how to actually do it is where to start in your mindset. Because if you, like, even with the Matt Brown show, like we're producing digital TV shows for brands and things like that. And I said to my producer literally 48 hours ago, I said, dude, we need to go subscription somehow. We need to figure out how to build a subscription into this. And we're struggling. We're struggling to come up with something that is succinct and easily digestible and easy to sell, because there's a lot of friction in trying to go subscription based. So my sense is that you got to have a mindset that this can be done. So I'd love to get your view on the mindset of the membership economy founder/entrepreneur. What kind of mindset should one use to be successful in this particular space?
Yeah, so it's a great question, and I love that we have a real example of your business, or both of your businesses. The first thing that you do to have a member mindset is you know really well who your ideal customer is, which I'm sure you do because you're a great marketer. And then you say, what is the forever promise that I'm making to them that they wish I would make? So putting myself in the shoes of your prospect, right? What do I want? Do I want to have a digital TV show? No. I want to be known for something that I'm doing. I want to have influence. I want to have reach. I want to, whatever it is, what is that higher order goal? And then how do you align what you're offering, the product offering, so that it maximizes the likelihood of achieving that outcome? And it has to be an ongoing outcome. So it can't be a one-time outcome like, I want to have an amazing wedding, right? Because that's finite. But if I say, I want to have an amazing marriage, right? And I always want to be really connected with my significant other, suddenly there's an opportunity to say, I understand the path that you need to go on to achieve that goal. And I can provide you with the advice, the resources, the tools to get you there. So we're aligned on the same goal. If you're a member of my organization, my commitment is to get you where you want to go and keep you there. And then, so a couple things happen, Matt. You start to see all the features and benefits you can offer, and you start to see all the people who might have paid you some money that weren't really interested in achieving that ongoing outcome. So an example in the world of streaming content, Disney, right? A lot of people join Disney Plus to get access to Hamilton, right? To get access to one piece of content. They don't want those customers. They want customers who want a variety of content on an ongoing basis, who want family entertainment for the foreseeable future. So you need to know so you make it less appealing for someone who just wants Hamilton and more appealing for somebody who has aligned goals with you, who says, I want you to just keep bringing me content and I want to keep enjoying it. I want princess movies. I want adventure. I want documentary. I want musicals because, our family has lots of different interests and we want to stay entertained. So the membership mindset is thinking of your customers as members and assuming that they're going to be with you for the long term, for better or worse. So the other piece of this is if you take advantage of them, they have your home number. They're members. They're not just some stranger that, buyer beware, has a transaction, never sees you again. These are people who call you when they have a problem because they feel like you have a real relationship.
Yeah, it's so interesting having this conversation now. So I mean, we're basically also doing a series of events here in Denver. It's called the $1 Million Accelerator series. So it's basically I'm getting Steve Blank and Alexander Osterwalder and basically the biggest names I've ever had on the show to be present on a live podcast with a room full of people. And I was talking to Mav, my producer. He's the guy he's the throat that I choke. But we were talking about, propositions, in that space. So how would you, if the forever promise was continual learning, it would then, in theory, based on what you're saying, to bake in a subscription proposition to even the event space, meaning you could pay a subscription every month to get access to any event and you would just stack the value on that price point. Is that what I'm hearing?
Exactly. And the value that you stack needs to align with the promise. So one thing that a lot of organizations do wrong is they stack whatever they happen to have, right? We have these old towels from last year. Everybody who comes to the event gets a towel, right? As opposed to having some discipline about, what is it that, if I want to be $1 million consultant or $1 million thought leader, right? What do I need? Well, I need the events, but maybe I also need to connect with other people like me and share ideas. And maybe I need some coaching. And maybe I need access to on-demand resources when I have a problem, whether that's, pre-created content, recorded content, or whether that's a phone number, or a Slack that I can just access and say, hey, Matt, quick question, need just-in-time advice. I'm about to meet with, an event planner and they're asking me to speak at their conference. What should I bill them? What should I ask for? So it's really thinking about kind of taking a step back and saying, what is it that they're trying to achieve and how do I layer in the right value? And it can be commerce. I think commerce, content, and community. So commerce is like, buy my thing, right? You can buy this, this course, or you can buy this event, or you can buy this microphone for your speaking. Content is the information that you provide to them. And then community is other people that can help me. And all three of those are worth exploring when you're building your offering to see, what is it that I'm really offering and what problem am I really solving? Usually those three together, you start to get some really creative ideas.
Well, I'm already getting the old neurons firing there. So thank you. That's really great.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, it's great. It's really great. I mean, this is why I do the show, right? It's not for anybody else anywhere in the world. It's just for me.
That's where it starts, right?
Yeah, exactly. I know, right?
Audience of one.
Exactly. Audience of one, baby. That's what matters. So I'd love to maybe unpack some of what you said. So my experience has been that in the subscription space, or to become a member where someone's paying a monthly fee, my personal experience has been that in certain markets like the technology ecosystem, like they're not necessarily familiar with the buying of memberships, if you know what I mean. And so my personal experience is that it can take longer to generate a certain threshold in revenue when you're selling subs or memberships as
Yep.
opposed to selling big ticket project fees. Is that experience true? And what can we do to shorten the sales cycle as it relates to subscription sales or membership fees?
Yeah. So you're bringing up a couple of important points. So one of them is, if I can sell you a car for $20,000, or you can subscribe to that car for $1,000 a month, right? In month one, I'm getting a lot less if you subscribe, but and it puts the onus on me to get you to stay for more than 20 months. If you're not staying for more than 20 months, if the average customer is not staying for more than 20 months, I'm worse off than if I just stuck with my traditional model. So one thing is, you really have to be confident that people are going to stay long enough so that the numbers add up. But a separate thing that you bring up is if your market is mature enough to handle subscriptions, right? And so, like, you gave the example of your former business with digital leads, and people had different budgets every quarter or every year. And so their processes weren't really aligned with yours. They're like, I can give you all my money right now, but I can't commit to anything for next year. Mm-hmm. Right. And so you have a mismatch there, a structural mismatch. And I'm trying to think, like, is there a subset of companies that can do it? Or, one example, SurveyMonkey. Are you familiar with SurveyMonkey?
Yeah, for sure.
The online survey tool. So they were an early client of mine. And something that was really interesting that they pointed out was that many of the people, the marketers that were using SurveyMonkey early on, were expensing it. So they weren't even asking for permission to use it. They knew that they were allowed to spend, let's call it, up to $1,000 on any one thing every month. So first of all, the price had to be less than $1,000 a month, number one. And number two, no matter how good the annual deal was, so $1,000 a month or $500 a year, which is an obvious good deal if you're planning to use the product indefinitely. If they couldn't sign a term for $5,000, because then it would, instead of being an expense, it would become a line item in their budget, and it would go through a different approval process. So one of the things that they had to do was optimize their offering for monthly and not make customers feel like they were less than. A lot of companies say, this is very much best practice in subscriptions now, that, there's always more. Not only is the annual tier a better price, but it also has more goodies in it, right? Like, it actually has benefits that it doesn't matter how much you're willing to pay. You can't access it unless you commit to the year. And so, in your case, I'd really be thinking about, what are they able to do? And what is the bigger goal? The bigger goal is that you want them to be committed to you every year. So for example, what you might say is, for every year that you spend at least, this is not subscription, but it's membership economy. For every year that you're current with me, you spend at least, let's say $10,000 a year with us, you get 20% off. In year 2, you get 20% off. In year 3, you get 30% off. In year 4, I'm exaggerating. It's not great numbers, but.
And then we'll give it to you for free for the rest of time.
Well, maybe, because if they stay with you for 4 years, and then we max out at, 50% off, half the price. If you disappear and come back, you start again at our regular numbers. And the reason we do it this way is to give you the flexibility. If you need to get out, there's no contract. But at the same time, we want to recognize organizations that are loyal to us and consistent with us. And, that's why we give you a much better deal if you are consistent. If you leave and come back, we also have to, reevaluate, re-prepare. It's much more expensive for us. We have a higher cost of onboarding a new customer or a lapsed customer than, just continuing to take care of them. So, you don't have, I love subscriptions, but I love membership even more. I love this mindset of, we are going to optimize for the people that are loyal to us and that are giving us the best possible opportunity to make the biggest impact.
Yeah, I love that. And the more I'm listening to you talk, I'm getting more and more excited about this idea. Something that that popped into my head as you were describing how to get customers to stay is to actually have, if I may speak frankly, to have the balls to actually go sub in the first place.
Yeah.
because I can sell a show now for $10,000-$15,000. Okay. So, and that's one conversation, half an hour, and close it. So I'm a sales guy. And then, but the problem is the downside. It's not a great business model, right? You don't have repeat income, and on the first of every month, I've got to find the money to cover my overheads. A terrible thing. Where you want to be is you on the first of every month, you want to have enough subs coming in to cover your whole OPEX on the first day of the month. Now you've got a great business, a business that you could sell depending on what you're selling and to who, and the numbers and so forth. But you have to have the courage to go that route. And that's the thing personally that I wrestle with subscriptions, not software, memberships. Do you know what I mean? And services, when you're selling content and high touch stuff, coaching or whatever the case is. It takes courage to go that route because you worry about, well, how long is it going to take me to get to where I need to cover my OPEX?
So a couple of things. This is so fun because we're actually talking about a real business case.
Yeah.
A couple of things that I'd be thinking about. One of them is if people are willing to pay this big first time fee with you, right? Let's call it boot camp, or let's call it getting started or onboarding. A lot of software companies actually do this where they're like, if you even want to be part of us, you pay the monthly fee plus you pay this big nut up front because it costs us a lot to get you up and running. But then what you could say is for your customers that have paid that, whatever you said, $15,000, right? Then you say, what is it that they wish you continued to do for them on an ongoing basis, and offer that as an add-on subscription. And you set the expectation from the very beginning. So yeah, Robbie, I'd love, if we work together, I can design this program for you, and we can, get it launched and many of my clients stop right there. But my best clients, actually, I have this subscription, which actually gives them access to X, Y, and Z, which are the features and benefits that I found help them accelerate achieving the goal that they have. And is that something that's, and you can give them the opportunity to buy that up front since you're a good salesman, right? And say, it costs 15 for the one transaction. And for an additional 10, you get another year or two or whatever it is of whatever that bundle of benefits is that helps me achieve whatever it is I'm trying to achieve. Right now, if you said, no, Robbie, I want to rip off the Band-Aid, I don't want to have transactions and subscriptions, then what I would say is write down a list, you and Mav, write down a list of everything you're worried about, everything that could go wrong. And then say, okay, how can I test these in a way that I can manage? So for example, a lot of my clients that have real variable costs, like, how many times, if you say, call me unlimited calls, right? So like I have unlimited calls on my membership if you want to, access my expertise, right? And of course my worry was, people are going to call me every 5 minutes, right? But it turns out that they don't. Like I have a very good understanding of how often people call and what that use curve looks like over time. So I'm not afraid of that anymore because I know what it looks like because I've tested it in small ways. You don't want to open it up to everybody and then for the rest of your life be doomed to have a money losing offer. But you can if you break it down into little bits and pieces, you can start to, tick off those worries one by one.
So mitigate the risk, basically. So test, and as opposed to like bank everything on one strategy, you can actually say, well, look, I mean, I personally it's interesting, right? Because I've come from this SaaS background and it's always subscription. There's not like big ticket and subs combined. Do you know what I mean? Because you're almost in your mind, you're like, well, it doesn't make sense because either I'm doing one or the other. Hybrid's not an option. And what I'm hearing is that it is in fact an option, and it can actually make the value of your bigger tickets more sticky if you combine them all together. If you recognize the context, however, being that what the forever promise is of your customer.
Yeah, exactly. Because the real value of the membership economy is understanding where that customer is trying to go. What is their ongoing problem, or what is that ongoing goal they're trying to achieve? And having enough expertise and experience to be confident that the path they need to take to get there and all of the different elements they need. So that's really where you where you want to start from, regardless of how you're charging them. And I used to feel like when I told you Netflix was my very first subscription client, they have a very, very rigid program, right? It's everybody is monthly. There's no annual. Although they've had some different tiers, like for the most part, there's really one offer that almost everybody gets. They only have one trial program, 2 week free. I mean, they've changed some of these things in the last few years, but they only had a 1 2 week free trial, 3 DVDs out at a time, unlimited streaming, cancel anytime, always kind of the same. And they always had no advertising. We're never going to sell you anything. I remember in early days, people would come to them and say, hey, what about if you also did video games? Or what about if you also sold the movies? Like maybe you love that movie that you saw so much that you want to own it. Netflix was like, nope, we do this one thing. We have a super clean model that allows us to really understand our numbers and grow in a really predictable and scalable way. Over time, we've seen that they have really evolved. And, last week they announced that they're going to do ads. They're going to have an ad-supported tier. So they're opening up. Peloton, right? You buy the bike outright, and then you subscribe to the software and the content. So you're starting to see more and more hybrid models. Tile and Apple tags, that you hook onto your valuables, and people are using now with their suitcases when we're traveling because everybody's losing their suitcases. There's a lot of different models. You can own the tiles outright, and then you can pay a subscription to have your stuff tracked. You can use their free subscription to have your stuff tracked, but it's not tracked quite as well. Or, you could imagine a model where you pay a monthly fee and you have unlimited tags and you put them on everything, and you pay a fixed fee for all of your stuff to be tracked. So there's lots of ways to do this. You could price it in a lot of different ways. The important thing, though, is when your new customer comes in, you're setting their expectation that this is not a one-time transaction. This is a forever relationship.
Do you want to hear a funny story about wheels on bags?
Sure.
So funny story. So the pop quiz, right? So we put a man on the moon in 1969. Okay. When do you think we put wheels on luggage? What year?
Oh, wow. It's not that long ago.
Before or after we put a man on the
After.
moon? After. Yeah, that's right. Isn't that crazy? Isn't that crazy?
It is so crazy. It is so crazy, but it's like where people focus their energy, right? If you say you want to do it, it's like a 4-minute mile. If you say you want to do it and you focus on it, you could probably do it. But the biggest issue is not that things aren't possible. It's that people don't even recognize that things could be different.
Yep, exactly. So community, I want to talk to you about this. I feel like, as an entrepreneur, there's communities everywhere. There's a community on Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, and then there's groups. There's the South African moms group for Austin. Then there's one for Denver. There's community literally everywhere. There's communities for guys who sell Smurfs, like the caricatures, So like when you talk about community, I get excited about that because I'm passionate about growing people and helping them, obviously grow their businesses and things like that. But when I think about community, again, I don't know where to start because, and I'm curious also, I think a lot of people don't even think about community around their podcasts or their personal brands or their SaaS businesses. It's just buy the software and that's all you're going to get from us, and then hopefully you'll stay for a year. We're not actually thinking about community as much as we should. Is that true? And if it is true as a premise, what is your advice around where to start when it comes to designing a community?
So a community should be seen like any other investment, and you should be thinking about the return on the investment. So that's the first thing. So if you're saying, okay, I already have a successful software product, or I already have a successful service that people are willing to buy, then you say, well, what additional value does community provide? And what am I going to get from my investment of providing it for my customers or my members? And so that's the first thing, is that you should be thinking about this with the same kind of discipline that you think about any other investment, not just like, oh, we should probably have a community because that'll make people more loyal, but really, look at it seriously. There are so many communities, as you pointed out, and many of them are free. And many of them are empty. I mean, you go to a lot of like online communities or groups and you don't like, you post your urgent question and nobody responds. So it's really important that you make it a vibrant place. It's like organizing a party or a conference. Like you have to have enough people there in order for other people to stay when they walk in. And that actually requires a lot of work, especially up front. Like it's like growing a tree that, the first few years, it takes a lot of effort and watering and careful tending. And when the tree's 50 years old, it kind of seems to take care of itself. But you asked, what do you do early on? Early on, you want to be really clear on the value you're providing and you want to make sure it's valuable. And you're better off with a really strong, small community of really passionate people that are getting great value. And then saying over time, I'm going to learn how to get my costs down and bring more people in. But I'm going to start by getting a kernel that's really effective. I think a lot of organizations overinvest in infrastructure for their community. So they're already worrying about automated payments and the different features. Can people post things? Can people access things? Can you do pictures? Can you do this and that? And really the first thing, like if you were starting a community around your expertise, you might say the first part of the community is we meet on Tuesdays from 9 to 10 on a LinkedIn Live. And we have a shared listserv so people can email the whole group. And that's free, right? Those two things, you're using other people's infrastructure, but you're investing in the people that are coming and the content, because that's what's going to keep people. It's the trust that keeps people coming back. And so that's what you're trying to manufacture is trust among these people under your brand. So does that help in how to think? So like, don't start by saying, what, like people always say to me, I want to start a community. What platform should I use? Right. And that's like, that doesn't even matter. I mean, you can build a great community on a really crappy homegrown platform, but you can spend all the money in the world to get the best platform. And if the people don't come, you're in trouble. Another thing is to think about the different kinds of people in your community, especially if it's a professional community. A lot of times, for example, very senior people don't want to post anywhere public. And again, back to this point about trust. And so they might be lurking and reading, but they're not going to create content. So somebody else has to be creating the content for the lurkers. Also, a lot of senior people have told me, I don't have time to come onto the community every morning. Like I said, but it's just like 3 minutes. You just check and see. It's like reading the newspaper, and they're like, well, I already have other habits. It's too much. I can't spend 3 minutes looking at one more thing. But then if you say, well, the community is going to be meeting in Hawaii for 3 days in December, and suddenly they have time and money to participate in the community over there. So really important to also think about what is the structure that your particular audience is going to get the most value out of and be most willing to commit to. So they'll spend money, their own money and time to go to Hawaii and really be in the same room with other people like them, but they won't spend 3 minutes to access a free online community.
Yeah, the thing that's in my mind is what form does it take? I had Ivan, to your point, when you say community, it's like, oh my God, I need like back in the day, like before the internet got mature and Web3 happened, whatever that is. But it was like you had those PHPBB forum. Those like the first versions of like community online, which is like these free forum boards. I had one when I had my first business. I was very, very young. I was like 26. It was a record label. It was a remix network, and people would come to the forum, download the samples, and I'd be sitting in the pound seats choosing the best music, and we'd release that globally. So that's one version of form. But I had Ivan Misner on the show, and he's the founder of BNI. I'm sure you probably know him. Business Network International is the world's largest networking organization. Like, I'm thinking that's also a form of community, isn't it? It's a network. Right? And also, so is a mastermind group of 6 people who meet once a month to talk about their sob stories or their successes, right?
Absolutely.
And is there a preferred form? Do you find in your experience that form X is most likely to lend itself to success?
I think if you're trying, the more high stakes it is for the person, the less important the financial cost is to them. and the more important the result, the likelihood of getting results are. So early in my career, if there was a meetup of people in my field and it was free, I might go to that, right? But now, I mean, I get invitations, I'm sure you do too, all the time to come to conferences for free, even really expensive conferences. But I think to myself, are these the people I really want to spend time with? And are these the people I'm going to learn from? And so now on the other side, if you said to me, there's a really expensive event, but it's the people that you really want to either network with or learn from, or it's an expert who you think is really smart and can really help you, you know, I'm at a point now where I'd rather pay a big fee. In fact, I'd love to pay a big fee because that also ensures that there won't be that many people there, and there won't be more junior people there and people who are less knowledgeable, right? It becomes kind of a signaling factor and a filtering factor.
Yeah, and also bigger is always not better. You know, when we're thinking about, I'm going to ask you now about commercial models, because I think you said it right up front, freemium. You know, so it's free and then you pay. And we've gone with a freemium model for this series of events. So it's, you know, free for 15 people, but then tickets you have to buy. And I said to Maverick, I was like, I call him Maverick. Mav, like Top Gun. But I said, you know, I said to him, wouldn't it make more sense to charge, you know, $750, but only sell to 75 people, and they become your membership community exclusively for 1 year. You cannot sell 76 memberships. It's 75. That is it. That's all you'll ever sell in this year. And you have to relinquish your membership to have somebody else, you know, replace you essentially. But you would do these shows exclusively for these 75 people. And you know, and again, but then the rub is, well, what's better, having people in the room or no one at all? You know what I mean? Because you don't know if someone's prepared to drop $750 on something like that. So commercial models, what is your advice there? Like, how do you design commercial models that are going to work in this, you know, membership economy space?
Yeah. So back to the community, if we're still talking about community, and you're worried, you're saying, you know, I want to have a really effective community, but I'm not sure, nobody wants to be the first one to the party, right? So I'm not going to write my $750 check until I know who else already wrote their $750 check, right? And so if you're going to try that, you know, you probably want your first year, your event to be, if it's an ongoing thing, right? You might limit it to 6 people. You might pick the 3 people that you most want to participate and offer it to them at a discount or for free, right? Your existing clients or people you admire. And then you can tell number 4, 5, and 6 that those 3 people are already there, right? And then suddenly you start to have a really good group. And then you invest yourself in good dynamics, right? Making sure that you're facilitating well, bringing in good experts. I've seen a lot of people, you know, you talked about your upcoming event in Denver, right? Where you have these amazing people coming, these amazing speakers, right? That brings other people and it up levels the conversation that all the people who attend are having, right? And then those people say, I want to come to Matt's events because there's always interesting people there and really good topics being covered at the right level, right? So it's kind of like you want to seed your community up front, whether that's a mastermind group or a conference or an online community. You want to make sure there's value there, you know, to seed it before the other people come. And then once it's kind of operational, you no longer need to pay to have people there or offer discounts to get the right people there.
Yeah. So what have you learned, going back to your Netflix story? I'm curious to ask you this. What did you learn about yourself in that particular engagement? Obviously that was, my understanding, is one of your first customers. What surprised you about that engagement? What did you learn about yourself, you know, as an entrepreneur, from this Netflix account engagement?
Well, I mean, it's such a good question. It's a long time ago now. So, you know, it's more than 20 years ago. I was pregnant with my 3rd child when when I was working with Netflix, but I learned a couple things. One of them was, I'd been a big firm strategy consultant before. I'd been a big, product manager at very good companies before. And I knew to be successful as an independent consultant, and this is sort of before there were influencers, but I knew that to be successful, I needed to have an area, I either needed to build a firm or have an area of expertise. And so I was like, what? I don't want to build a firm. I knew that. I thought, so what's the expertise that I have that is narrow enough that I can credibly be the expert, but also meaty enough that I can stick with it for a long time, and also interesting enough that I'm happy to get up every morning and think about that. And Netflix was I think my fifth client once I went out on my own as an independent consultant. And I'd been playing with all these ideas, where am I going to focus? And I'd done, product management and financial services and HR and talent development and wealth services, all these different things. And nothing really floated my boat. And at Netflix, I was like, oh my God, I love this. Subscription it's so analytically rigorous. It's so built on trust and building loyalty and treating your customers well on an ongoing basis. So it felt really good from my heart. And I saw all the potential. Like it just, I was like, oh, you could do this with razor blades. You could do this with professional advice. You could do this with, software, and I like my head was exploding with all the potential. And and that's really like, for me, that was my biggest learning there. I also learned a lot of things about best practices and subscriptions that I still draw on, 20 something years later, that are like, these are things I learned at Netflix, and you know what? They still hold true.
What are some of those? I mean, for some kind of like absolute must-dos. So you want to do membership community or subs as an entrepreneur. What are, one or two must-dos?
So a couple things that Netflix does really well. One of them is cancel anytime. Okay. And not only can you cancel, like there's so many subscriptions where you can't get out of it because in the fine print, even though you're paying monthly or it's like you're paying monthly, but you can only cancel in January, and you can only cancel on Thursdays at 4 p.m. Right. So one thing is, make it easy for people to leave. This whole thing is built on trust. The subtitle of this book, the Forever Transaction, is, a subscription so compelling, your customers will never want to leave. It's not will never be able to leave. It's that they don't want to leave. So make it easy for them to cancel. Probably the number one thing. Netflix now has a thing where if you've been a subscriber for a year or more without logging in, they automatically cancel you. They don't want your zombie revenue. I mean, that's amazing, right? There's so many companies that are like, well, we make most of our money on zombie revenue. Like if we actually had to provide value to people, we wouldn't make so much money. So I think, to summarize, the most important thing about a subscription is that you're committed to your customers' long-term positive outcome. And everything that you do, every decision you should make, you say, does this align with wanting to optimize their outcome? And if you do that, you'll find your way.
That's a really powerful point to discuss. I'm curious, let's say for a moment that has been resolved in your mind. I'm just keep thinking about loyalty for some reason, because in the content space like Disney Plus, Netflix, Hulu, there's very little loyalty. It's kind of like, how much inventory do you have and how much new Ryan Reynolds movies can you shove onto my homepage of Netflix every week? That's what keeps me paying a Netflix subscription. But I'm also on Disney Plus and yada, yada, yada. And if I feel like I'm getting a better content or, a better proposition at Disney Plus, I'll probably get rid of Netflix. And also my wife and I are like, we're going through Netflix. We can't find anything. I don't know if you've had that experience. It's like, God, It's frustrating. So price points. So Disney Plus and all these, content providers are priced similarly. There's not one that's way more expensive than the other. How does one in the membership economy approach pricing? So you don't want to outprice yourself. You don't want to be too cheap, but you want to find a place where it's going to continue to hit the conversion numbers that you're looking for so that you can hit, sort of OPEX numbers that you want to cover or revenue targets you want to reach. So what is your advice around figuring out price points regardless of what you're trying to sell?
Yeah, it's a great question. I would start by saying, know what your outcome is and what your goals are. So I've been working, my daughter's in college and she's, interviewing for these consulting firm jobs. And, one of the tricks in these, these case study interviews is you have to know what the company cares about. So, should they go into this new market? Well, one of the questions is, what would it cost them to get into the market? Do they actually have that much money? Do they have that much money around? And what kind of return on investment do they need over what time horizon, right? And it's kind of the same with subscription. So you might say, my goal with subscription is actually purely about incremental revenue, right? I'm going to charge them a big fee up front for my marquee, flagship service. And this is just incremental revenue so that I can cover my OPEX, right? You said that if you could cover your OPEX with your subscription, you're good, right? You would price very differently than if you said, this is my only business and I have to make a profit here, right? So even if you compare, let's say, you were talking about streaming content, right? If you look at Netflix and Disney Plus, which we've talked about, and also, let's say, Apple Plus, they have very different business models. For Netflix, the only way they make money is through that subscription that you pay for, right? Disney, this is both something that gives them, a predictable cash flow, but it's also something that exposes consumers to all of their body of content, which you can then access in other places, right? At their theme parks, through their products, through their television stations, and all the other stuff that they have. And with Apple, right, this is really a way of extending the value of their hardware, right? Ultimately, Apple's a hardware company. I mean, they're really moving into services. And, I saw, estimates that, they could triple their valuation by really leaning into services in the next few years. But each one of those companies has a different model. And so what they're willing to charge for like Apple gives away the subscription for 6 months when you buy any of their products. Netflix never gives away their product. Never, because they have this very clean model. It's the only thing we make money on. It doesn't make sense for us to give it away. So first thing is, when you're pricing, is to know what your goals are. Second thing is, I always say with pricing, you want to look at 3 things. You want to look at what are your costs, right? And what kind of margin do you need for your business to meet your goals? So cost. Second thing is, what other options does the customer have, right? So you do want to understand competition. And I always say, think about competition, not just in terms of companies that look just like you, but companies that solve the same problem. So maybe Netflix is competing against other streamers. They're also competing against other forms of entertainment, right? They did a lot better during COVID when you couldn't leave the house than, they're doing now when we have other options for how to have fun. So that's the second thing. And then the third thing is value. What kind of value is perceived by the customer? And so, I'll often ask, when I'm doing market research on pricing, what would you expect to pay for this? And what is the likelihood that you would sign up for it? And then I always say to them as a follow-up, and if I offered it to you at that price minus a 10% discount, would you sign up right now? Because that's when the rubber hits the road. Because people always say, they'll say, well, what would I pay for, this bottle? And I'd probably pay, $29. And you're like, oh, really? Well, I'll offer it to you for 20. And they're like, oh, no, but I don't need one. I already have one. Or like a good example this week was, I don't know if you've been following this story, but BMW, the car manufacturer, is offering an aftermarket subscription to your seat warmers.
Oh, yes, I saw that, which is ridiculous.
It's ridiculous. Somebody said to me, did they even do any market research on their pricing? And I'm sure that, they're not stupid. I'm sure they did research, but they probably said, what do you think would be fair if you were offering a subscription for seat warmers? And people are like, I don't know. Like if it was a cold winter day, I'd pay $20 a month for a warm seat if my car didn't come with it from the factory. But what they didn't ask is, great, now I'm going to ask you to pay for it. And they're like, are you kidding me? I just spent $70,000 on a really fancy car. I shouldn't have to pay extra. So I think it's also in how you ask and understanding how people value it.
It's very interesting that, right? Because it's this like the hybrid again, right? Big ticket and then a whole bunch of additional things that you can pay. I don't necessarily believe that that seat warmers was the best way to do it. You know, like you BMW.
They're getting crushed right now. I mean,
you know, there's got to be a better way.
that.
Like, what about coming to the launch of a new car, or you know, in a certain line of owners for a line of owners? Do you know what I mean? And or content. I mean, Tesla's. I mean, I would subscribe to pretty much anything they put on that dashboard if it was cool.
Yeah,
You know?
I mean, what's happening, I mean, which is so fascinating in the automotive world, is that we're all starting to get a sense of what bothers us and what feels fair. And there's two things here for a company like BMW. One of them is they have to, you know, you don't really know how people are going to feel till you put it in the market. It's like new Coke. Like, it seemed like a good idea until they actually, you know, put it out there and people were like, the first sip tastes good and the second sip tastes too sweet, right? The idea seems reasonable, but when you're actually asking me to pay 18 bucks a month, even if I can afford it, it's annoying. And then you get it. Like, I've been trying to ask people, because I've been posting about it, getting a lot of feedback, you know, what bothers you? People will say things like, well, it's hardware, so we shouldn't have to subscribe to hardware. But there's lots of examples of subscribing to hardware. So why wouldn't you subscribe to this? Like, you might subscribe to a car or a Peloton, right? Or a Whoop, you know, Fitbit type of, you know, thing. But why not this? Or they said, you know, it's a safety thing. And like, obviously heated seats are not a safety thing, right? But for some reason, it really upsets people. And so understanding how people react. And then the other thing is, things that today we say we'd never do, in a year, we might forget that we ever said that. Like, oh, like I would never give, you know, strangers my social security number. And now we're like posting it left and right. You know, they ask you for all this information, and like, it just changes, you know, what is normal. It changes so fast.
Yeah. So Plateau Strategies and your podcast. Do you want to give that a punt?
Plateau Strategies?
Yes. Is that correct? Your consulting arm?
Oh, Peninsula Strategies.
Peninsula Strategies. My mistake. Similar, okay. Not the same. This is Peninsula
Similar, not
Strategies.
The same. Yeah. No strategies for hitting plateaus, but maybe strategies for breaking through plateaus.
Peninsula.
Yeah, no, it's Peninsula Strategies because I'm on the peninsula of San Francisco in California.
Awesome.
And yeah, I help companies and organizations accelerate their subscription revenue. And build recurring revenue, predictable recurring revenue, and maximize lifetime value of every customer. So that's what I do. I've done it for, you know, hundreds of organizations of all sizes. And I have a podcast of my own, which is called Subscription Stories, where I interview people who run subscription businesses. So check it out.
Awesome stuff. Thank you so much for your time. It's been a real privilege having you on the show. It's Robbie Kellman, everybody. Robbie Kellman Baxter, actually. The two books are The Membership Economy, Find Your Super Users, Get That Subscription Revenue Going for Your Business, and The Forever Transaction. I'm definitely going to read both of these because I think timing is a thing that you just got to be aware of, and they're very timiest books and a very timiest conversation for me. So thank you so much for your time, Robbie. Thank you for all of you tuning in, and we'll see you all again soon. Cheers.